Hello, peeps. Welcome back to the TCast, the name we've got so far for the show, episode number 2. And I know there's lots of podcasts out there, there's lots of listening shows that we enjoy. Most shows, I would say, probably have a slow ramp to them. They build their topics, they have one or two guests, they progress nice and slowly, and they build up to where they want to be. And sometimes it takes you a while to get a little bit of footage. And I'm going to tell you right now, on episode number 2, we have taken a huge leap, a huge jump forward. We've gone from episode 1, introducing you to athletic therapy and what this show is going to be about. We've now captured a special guest today, and we're going to hang out for a little bit. But just to give you a little bit of rundown on the guest we have today, without naming him yet. First of all, recipient of the Queen Elizabeth Jubilee Awards in 2006 and 2013. This athlete was inducted into the Ottawa Sports Hall of Fame 2014 as an athlete. Canadian team sledge hockey team captain, gold medal, Boston 2008. Canadian team sledge hockey team captain, gold medal, Torino 2006. King Clancy Outstanding Achievement Award 2006. World All-Star Team Sledge Hockey Player, hold your breath please, 1998, 1999, 2000, 2001, 2002, 2004, 2005. And yes, I'm not done. MVP Canadian Sledge Hockey Team, 1999, 2000, 2001, 2002, 2004. Achievement Awards received by the Prime Minister of Canada and the Premier of Ontario. Again, hold your breath. 1994, 1998, 2002, 2006, 2010. And on top of all that, in 1993, was a provincial team member of Ontario's Canadian Provincial Wheelchair Basketball Team, where he won a silver medal. I've got a few more things we're going to introduce to you in a minute about some of the achievements this gentleman's done. But to cap it all off, the latest achievement is 2018, the South Korea Pyeongchang Winter Paralympic Games chef de mission. And gentlemen, if you haven't, or ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't figured this out right now, this gentleman's name is Todd Nicholson, and we've just taken leaps and bounds in moving our show forward. So Todd, thanks for coming to the show, my friend.
Thanks very much, Tony. It's been an honor and a pleasure, both being an athlete with you for a number of years, but also being a friend of somebody who has given back to our community in leaps and bounds, not only when it comes to the sporting world, but also in the education world and a lot of the things. So when you called and asked if I'd come on the show, without hesitation, it was an absolute yes. Looking back, to when my car accident happened in 1987, where I lost use of my legs and not knowing where I was going to end up, honestly, to fast forward 31 years later, I would have never imagined all the things I've been able to accomplish. But I'll be the first one to tell you, and I haven't accomplished any of this on my own. I've had tremendous support, both locally, nationally, and internationally, to achieve a lot of the goals that we've set. When you look at my history and my success, I attribute a lot of that to the people that I played with and the people that helped me get to those games or help me achieve some of the things that we were looking to accomplish. So I think, for your listeners and for your viewers, that's probably one of the biggest things, that lesson coming out of today is surround yourself with the right people. I've never, I think one of the big important things that we all need to realize is not everybody can know everything, but you can be very well connected to individuals that do have the answers and do have the ability to be able to help you achieve that success.
Just for our viewers again, if you don't know who Todd Nicholson is, YouTube, there's videos galore. His face is plastered all over the Paralympics. His face is plastered all over the growth of Paralympics. And that's where I want to start today is you got in the sport fairly early when Paralympics wasn't really a word. It wasn't really well known. And so where is the sport now? I mean, we were lucky enough to help build sledge hockey, but outside of our little bubble, there's another 27 sports in para sports, cross-country skiing, and there's rugby, and there's all sorts of different summer sports, track and field and things like that. We won't get into all of those sports, but there's a huge Paralympic movement. So Take me back to where, I mean, when you first started, but really want to know where the focus is, because there's a lot of people I don't think understand. They think the winter games come summer and winter, and then it's over and it's done. And then they're like, oh, there's another set of games afterwards. So where's parasports now? How far has it come, and where's it going, and what's the traction that parasports is got running with it right now?
I think when we look at Paralympic sports as a whole, as you say, they've come a long way. You know, I've got two memorable moments in sports. The first one was in '94 when sledge hockey was part of the first year. It was part of the Paralympic Games, and looking up into the stands and seeing my parents sitting there, and it wasn't hard to find them because there were 2 of 6 people sitting in the stands. And then fast forward to 2010, which was my last and final games as an athlete, and again looking up into the stands and didn't have trouble finding them because there was them and 75 other people from my hometown that came to watch me play in my final games. But the stands were full. And we continually to see not only hockey, but a lot of the other both summer and winter sports at the Paralympic Games, where it's really starting to improve. Attendance are breaking records, our social media and capability and platforms in terms of people being able to see the games is probably one of the biggest reasons why the Paralympic movement has grown to where it is. You said we have 27 sports, and yes, that's true. In the Paralympic Games, we have 27 sports. But I think one of the biggest messages that we need everybody and all your listeners to understand is that for me, as somebody who is a T12 paraplegic, I don't have the use of my legs. I've got no feeling pretty much from the belt line down. There's absolutely nothing that I can't do. I just may have to do it a little bit different. And if you go into everything that you're trying to accomplish with that mindset, I think that's one of the big things that will help us create a social inclusion within our communities and our provinces and our nation for us to be successful. You know, the Paralympic movement, yes, has it come a long way? A lot of that has come because of a couple of things. Technology is one. So technology, you know, my first sled that I played in weighed 45 pounds, was made out of steel. The sled I use today is 11 and a half pounds. It's custom made. I've got custom made sticks, so on and so forth. And that's very consistent across all of the sports, or all of the sports that anybody is playing. There's adaptations that can be made to the everyday modern equipment that what we call an able-bodied athlete would use.
Like there's more companies stepping up now, coming up with high-tech sticks, high-tech sleds for sledge hockey, and I think it's probably the same across the board with wheelchair, right? More companies are stepping with high-tech wheelchairs, you know, lighter material. Like there's companies that are starting to pop into the Paralympic world.
Yeah, and I think it's a combination of a couple of things. One, they see value in it, and two, I think as athletes, they're pushing more and more and providing that research and innovation that we need to be able to expand on the equipment that we're using as athletes. And we're also seeing more and more athletes getting involved in the research and development side of things and wanting to give back to the sports that they've played in for all these years. You know, we as athletes and every organization, you talk as if, you know, we want to remain athlete-centered. We want to have that capability and have that as a title within what we're doing. We're not there yet. You know, every organization says they are, but I think we still have some steps that we need to make in order to truly become athlete-centered. It's in the right direction, but there's still some stuff to happen. When we look at the Paralympic movement itself, are there some challenges? Absolutely. You know, I went to my first Summer Games in London in 2012, and I went there as chair of the Athletes Council for the International Paralympic Committee. So I represented at that time every Paralympic athlete for every sport to every nation, to the IPC Governing Board and to the IOC Athletes Commission. And for me, going to those games, it really literally opened my eyes to all of the individuals with disabilities and people with disabilities and who I needed to be a voice for. Because for some of those individuals, they physically don't have a voice because of whatever disability they may have. So again, it's trying to be an advocate for all those individuals. And I think that's something that us as athletes, we're trying to do as much as we possibly can, and that is be that advocate so that not only will the Paralympic movement grow, but the social changes within our country and within our nations will also grow and change. Rewind back to the games in 1998 in Nagano, Japan, where anybody with a disability in Japan was shunned. Families were not allowed to be outside. You know, if you had a sibling who was older than you, chances are they would never get married because of fear of Following the games, that social change happened almost immediately, where they seen the value in people with disabilities. That way they can be contributors to society. They do have knowledge that can be used very valuable. Russia, as most recent as 2014, when they were awarded the games 7 years prior, they said, we'll host the Paralympics, but we don't have any Paralympic athletes. And they ended up topping the medal tables, like not even close to anywhere else, to anybody. Yeah. And they still continue to produce some amazing athletes. Right. Is there a reason for that? We're not going to go there today, but I think there's a lot of things that the Olympics and the Paralympic Games are one thing. What the Paralympic Games brings to the Olympic movement is that social inclusion, that social change within nations. And the Paralympic movement itself, I think, where is it going to go? If you had asked me 30 years ago if we'd be here where we are today, I would have said not in my lifetime. So I think with social media, with the capability for more and more people to get active and see what is capable or what people are capable of doing, the sky's the limit in terms of what we'll see our people with disabilities doing.
I still have yet to see an OR flag. So if anybody knows what that means, you can have a good giggle over that. So no, that's good. And I think just real briefly, just to summarize the Paralympic stuff, my experience when we were sort of together with Team Canada, the one thing I took out of it a lot was the big separation from the Paralympic world still to the community, right? People not knowing how to get from A to X, right? How do I get connected? And I had limited insight just in the Paralympic world, but I'm just going to safely assume it's across the board with tennis and rugby and stuff like that. But I think there's still a disconnect, and hopefully it's getting closer. But there's a disconnect I found between that community level and the Paralympic level of how a mom or dad has a son who's 10 years old with spina bifida or sacrogenesis goes, how do I provide a dream to my child to get to this level? And they were just, people were walking around going, I don't know. And yet on the flip side of it, these national teams are going, where's all our athletes? So I think that's, from my view, right, that I always thought that there was a big bridge that needed to be gapped in there, and hopefully we can continue to grow that gap and fill in that bridge.
And I'm hoping one of the ways that we can do that is with the inclusion aspect. So when you look at national sport organizations on the able-bodied side, creating a component to those programs that allow for inclusiveness, getting out into the schools and getting the kids who are with disabilities in the schools, instead of when it comes time for physical education or physical activity, instead of them going to the library or the principal's office or whatever, getting them active, teaching the teachers how to adapt their programs to be inclusive. And what will end up happening, at least my hope or our hope is, with that happening, is that will then put that drive and that sense of wanting to accomplish something in the kids, getting the fear over their parents, because I think there's a lot of kids out there who want to do stuff, but unfortunately, if you're a parent of a child with a disability, you put them in another bubble over and above being a regular child or a child without a disability, not a regular child, but a child with a disability. So again, it's trying to get over some of those hurdles to get them into sports or into whatever they're passionate about. You and I are both very sports related, but I also understand that sport is not for everybody. So you got to find that passion in whatever it is you love, whether it's reading, writing, artistic, dance, whatever it may be, and put that passion that I put in sports and put that into whatever it is you want to do. The challenges that we see with that are then when you get the high-level elite players. One of the things in the Paralympic movement that they've done, and rightfully so, is they've brought in a lot of professional coaches. And the professional coaches come with a mindset of, if you're not going to do it, there's 10,000 other athletes that will. Yep. And unfortunately, in the Paralympic movement, we don't have 10,000 other athletes that are also in that position. Yep. So one of the things that we need to be very aware of and think of has to do with, you don't have 10,000 athletes. Right now, you've got one in front of you. Yep. And you have no idea when that next one is going to come.
That's right.
So we've got to create and make sure that those athletes that we currently have, that we look after their health, their concerns, and ensure that they still have the quality of life that everybody else has. Coming in to here today, I met an individual who got me into sports, and he can't do anything anymore.
Yeah.
Like, he can't play sports anymore. And it's unfortunate, but we abused our bodies when we were younger, and unfortunately, our bodies are starting to feel and take that abuse and give it back to us now tenfold.
Yeah.
So we've got to ensure that whatever it is we do for our athletes going forward, that we look after their health and the safety and security of them, but also ensuring that we expand the Paralympic movement to a level that is very professional, because I think that's one thing that all your listeners need to understand, is the Paralympic athlete of today compared to the Paralympic athlete of my day is a full-time athlete.
Yep.
They're working 100%, the time commitment that's required upon those individuals. It's very difficult for them to work a full-time job like I did when I was competing. And with that in mind, financially, there's a big burden. So in a lot of situations, we don't get to keep an athlete for the 31 years that I've been doing, because they need to go out and have a quality of life as well and get a job to be able to pay their bills.
Well, and to your point, right, you go back 20, 30 years ago, and the Paralympic athlete, I don't know what the numbers were, but there was probably a lot of people in it because it was a pastime, or it was a sub-sport to go and play. And then, what, I qualified for Team Canada to go and play tennis? Yeah, go and play.
Yeah.
Okay. Whereas now, and we saw that change in our sport when we were going through it, but now there's on-ice testing, there's off-ice testing, there's nutritional seminars, that athlete development model is being superimposed over the Paralympic athlete. And they're like, look, it's not good enough that you're just a Paralympic person. You need to be an athlete, and you need to take care of your body, your mind, your nutrition, your health, and then throw that into your sport and be a better athlete for whatever your sport is.
And that's what the Olympic movement is, right? The Olympic movement is your elite. It's your top of the line.
That's right.
And that's what we want to ensure the Paralympic athletes and Paralympic Games are about as well. It's not about participation. It's about elite performances where we are doing everything we possibly can to exceed our expectations that we've set for ourselves. There are grassroots programming out there for those individuals that don't aspire to represent their country, but for somebody who's represented the country now for 31 years, it's quite an honor.
Yeah.
It's an amazing experience. I get emotional every time I hear the national anthem for no reason whatsoever, and it's just, and I would imagine military and Peace Corps and individuals that represent their country to that level probably feel the same way.
So we'll go off on a topic because some people may not understand, or they don't have the ability to ask a question, or they may not, they may be shy about some of this stuff. But I mean, you're part of this Paralympic movement because what people don't understand, I mean, you were born able, right? You played hockey, you played football, you played high school football, and we've had in our time on buses and planes, we've had many discussions about your journey. But you've gone through a couple of transitions in your life, and I'll talk about the second transition in a minute. I want to get your feedback on that. But the first one was, and you know the story better than anybody else does, but 17, 18, 19 years old, your life went through a transition. So just talk about, I said, that transition from being a kid who can play football, who can run, who can play hockey, does what he wants, and probably thought you were invincible, to life changing a moment where you now are forced to make changes and you're forced to change your mindset. And, when I think of Todd Nicholson, I think of a guy who's a motivator. He's a motivational speaker. He's a beacon light for the Paralympic world, and you do all this stuff. But it might be fair to say, at some point in Todd Nicholson's life, Todd Nicholson wasn't that guy. You were just one of us who hung out and, wanted to do sports and play video games and drink beers and didn't think about being a motivational person. So at some point, the light had to switch from going, I've got a different journey now. So how do you go through that? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people that, when you think about, if my life changed, I couldn't handle it. And you see that, but if I lost a leg, or if I lost an ankle, or if I got paralyzed, I wouldn't be able to do it. What's that mindset? And what was that timing frame? Did it take you a year, 2 years, 5 years? Are you still challenged with that? Who knows, right? But what's that transition been like?
So for me, as you say, as a kid growing up, I grew up in the able-bodied world. So I had access, I was just active in sports before. I had access to coaches and grew up in an organized sporting system and a sporting world, and that's where my passion for sport grew. Was I going to go anywhere with it? No. I had no desire to as a kid, did I want to play in the NHL? Absolutely, but what kid doesn't? I wanted to play in the NHL, but there was no way I was ever going to get there. And then, as you say, when my accident happened at the age of 18, I was on my way home from the high school prom and hit a snowdrift, lost control of the car, and broke my back. And that drastically changed my life. You got to really think back to, at least I think back to prior to my accident, I was this shy little kid who was usually last picked when it came to teams and that sort of stuff, and never really got good at anything, but I loved everything that I did, and I always had fun. And for me, growing up as a kid, that was one of the things that my parents instilled in me was there's always somebody out there to help you, and two, you got to always make sure you're having fun. So fast forward to after my accident, I was in the hospital for 9 months with waiting to get into the rehab and a couple of other things as well. But I ended up going into the Ottawa Civic Hospital here, which is general campus now. And that hospital was a teaching hospital. So I had a lot of student nurses who come in to see me every day.
Oh, shucks.
And for me, that's where my shyness went away, because I saw the fear in their eyes when they were coming in to see me. You got to remember, I'm on total bed rest. I'm not allowed to move. They would come in and flip me over and so on and so forth. I wasn't sure how much movement I was going to get back, if any at all. And that shyness went away. And I had to become the advocate for myself and also for them too, to really teach them how to learn and how to look at mentors and providing that opportunity.
Give them permission.
Yeah, give them permission to do things and to teach me those lessons. And fast forward 31 years later, and I continue to do that. And I think that's something that as athletes or as people with disabilities, we got to have a general understanding of, and if we want the world to get better in terms of how people with disabilities are either treated or have the ability to be able to showcase what we're capable of doing, you've got to be able to speak to your mind and speak it in a way that people understand. We, as athletes and as individuals with a disability, we overcome challenges every day, but so do you. They're like the able-bodied world population. I'm sure there's days you don't want to get up out of bed either. And I think that's one of the things that you need to understand, that just because you've had something traumatic happen to your body or something traumatic happen to you, whether it's a loss of a loved one or a pet or whatever it may be, that's where you call upon your circle of friends. And you really find out who your circle of friends are when something drastic or traumatic happens to you. They will come out of the woodwork to make sure that you continue on and that you get out of bed. And I remember for the first quite a few years, I would have challenges. I didn't want to get up in the morning. I didn't want to go train. I didn't want to do anything. And I found a passion in motivational speaking. So what I used for motivation was motivating kids. So I would go to a school, and when I would come out of that school, I'm talking to 500 or 600 kids. Now you got to remember, as a kid growing up, if I get up and public spoke in front of the class, my ears were on fire, my head felt like it was going to explode. And now I'm talking to 500 or 600 kids, trying to inspire them to go out and try something new and to never give up on their dreams. I would leave the school so energized that
Feeling good that you contributed, you've affected 500 kids' lives.
Well, actually, you know what? In all honesty, Tony, I would go into those presentations hoping to change the mind of one person in the room. Whether it was a kid, a student, a staff member, whatever it was. And if I left there knowing that I've changed that one person's attitude towards trying something new for them, then I did what I wanted to do. It's a lot of people to have to talk to hopefully get through to one person.
Yeah.
But if I made it through to that one person, they made it through to me to help me continue on going and going and going. Yeah. And like I said, 31 years later, I'm still going, still inspiring others to do things, but I'm taking their inspiration and what it is they're doing to, again, allowing me to share my story and what you're doing here. You have no idea how many listeners there are on the other end of this podcast.
Yep.
But you're still willing to take the time and devote the energy that's required, because if there's one person out there that's listening that you can help make a difference for, then it's served its purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. If you can affect mankind in one way, whether it's one child, one person, and it alters their their journey a little bit. I think there's no greater,
Yeah.
there's no greater reward, right? If you can affect one person.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great. So what I want to do then is sort of that theme of transition. 2000, and correct me on your timelines, but 2006, Vancouver. No, 2010. Sorry, 2010 Vancouver was your last games in terms of an athlete at the sledge hockey level. I think that you had dabbled in some marathons and doing some other things, but I think from a competitive elite athlete representing Canada, that was your sort of swan song. So in 2010 and now we're 2018, and I don't think this is a Paralympic question versus just an elite athlete now going home and going, I don't have to get up and train in the morning. I don't have to not eat French fries anymore. I don't not have to have a beer. I get to just live a life of regularity and have some sort of my own schedule. But let's go through that transition. What's going through your mind? Were you ready to step away from the game? Were you ready to stop being an elite athlete? And then sort of what were some of these challenges, getting up day one, getting off the plane, coming home and then going, well, now what, right? There's no more training. There's no more tryouts. There's no more camps. There's no more leaving my family. What was that sort of transition now going from an elite athlete to Todd Nicholson, the dad?
And I think for me, going into the games in Vancouver in 2010, it was my 5th games. And I knew going into the games that they were going to be my last. I've had health issues throughout my whole career and continue right up to today. I still have health issues that I deal with on a daily basis. But so the health issues I had going into the games in Vancouver in 2010, I knew it was going to be my last. So in a mindset, I knew going to those games so I did what I wanted to do. You were at the games yourselves,
Yeah.
I didn't attend the closing ceremonies. There was a reason for that.
Yeah.
It's because I didn't want to see it end,
Yeah.
but at the same time, I was looking forward to the next chapter in my life. I looked up into the stands and seen 2 8-month-old kids in the stands, and as you say, I wanted to spend some time at home and be a dad. And then got elected to the Athletes Council. So basically I went from, at that point I had been a player, I'd been a coach, I'd been an athlete, and now I was moving more onto the administration side of things.
Yeah.
And when I moved over to the administration side of things, that was my next chapter. I didn't realize it back in 2010 when I moved into that position, but that position itself took me all over the world. As you say, I've had the opportunity to do a number of sports. So I've done triathlons, duathlons, marathons, wheelchair basketball, wheelchair tennis, and skeleton, all internationally. And for me, having the ability to be able to represent and go compete in all of those sports gave me a true understanding of all the different sports and how they work together. Fast forwarding to where we are today, the last 9 years of my life, or last 8 years of my life, I haven't been able to wear Team Canada. So I haven't been able to be that Canadian national pride because I was representing all athletes from all sports, from all nations, to the governing bodies and to the voices that we all hear in our heads. And then this last year being chef de mission for 2018, again, I went into these games in 2018 knowing they were going to be my last and moving on to the next chapter of my life, which I had hoped to start in 2010, and that was, as you say, to be a dad.
Yeah.
My kids are now 9 years old. I've got a boy and a girl, Gwen and Tate. They're twins, and they're getting active in sports. They have been since they were 2, and I've missed most of their life. But at the same time, I've got an amazing wife in Emily Glossop who has been there to raise our kids and take them to different games and different events. And so I think for your listeners that are contemplating next steps, I think there's so many opportunities that if it hasn't happened to you yet, that will get presented to you. Doors continue to open. I finished my role as chef de mission in 2018 following the games, and since that time I've had many offers to go on and do other things within the movement. But for me, it's time to take a break, and I think to get some new ideas. We need some new ideas in terms of the Paralympic movement. Why did I retire in 2010? It was my choice. I decided to retire because there was nothing else I wanted or needed to accomplish within the sport. And I wanted to allow the opportunity for other athletes to come in and ensure that the sport continued. Where we have some of those challenges today, unfortunately, is some of the sports have gotten so professional that as athletes, we don't have the ability to be able to provide input or give back to the sports that have given us these opportunities for years.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that I see with sledge hockey, or para ice hockey they call it now, but one of the things I see with it is, as a leading nation, we are not giving back to the sport. The sport is slowly turning into very similar to, unfortunately, what the women's program is. And not knocking the women's program, but you have 2 teams at the top, and then you have a number of other teams as well. So we've got to ensure and create a system where we continue to give back and continue to grow the sports, arts, culture, music. Again, not everybody's going to be passionate about sport. Yeah. So we've got to ensure that we create that synergy in everything that we're doing.
Yeah. Quickly, we've never talked about this, and I know that I had my own experience and thought process when I left the game and stepped away. But I think I'm always intrigued by what an athlete thinks, and I never talked to you about it, and I think at the time it wasn't appropriate, and it wasn't appropriate for a couple of years anyways to let sort of dust settle. But I remember the final buzzer in Vancouver, and it was a disappointing games for us as a sledge hockey team. I think we went in ranked 1 or 2, and there was expectations of us, and the semifinal game didn't go as well as it planned, and losing to the aforementioned Japan, which you talked about, and then obviously we all know what happened in the bronze medal game with about 22 seconds left, and goal scored against us against Norway, and we ended up losing the bronze medal game. But here we were in Vancouver, in your nation. We're playing UB Center, UBC, their ice hockey rink, and there's 7,000 people in the stands, and we shake hands, everybody's doing their thing, then the anthem plays, and we had a really close-knit team. Guys were tapping each other on the helmet and hugging, stuff like that. I remember you just hanging around the ice for a little bit, and you kind of looked up in the stands a little bit, and and at that moment I thought, what's going through this guy's head? Like, at this second, the journey you've taken from Tom Nicholson to the able-bodied kid at 16, 17 to becoming the Paralympic athlete, and all these gold medals you won, and silver medals and bronze medals, and representing Canada, and you were the flag bearer at that game too. I believe at that start, right? You were the flag bearer.
I was in 06. I was in 06.
Opening or closing ceremonies?
No, for 06. Not for 2010.
Okay.
Not for 2010.
But for the opening ceremonies or closing?
Opening ceremonies in 06.
So you'd been the flag bearer for Canada.
Yeah.
And so here it was, the last 14 seconds, 10 seconds, 8 seconds, you're going to be on the ice representing your country. You're skating off the ice. We had the little polyurethane things we got to skate on, and you guys got to go back to the dressing room. But take me through that 10-second, 18-second, 20-second window. The final buzzer's going, you're shaking your hands, you're looking up at the stands, and now it's time to get to the dressing room knowing that's it. My career's done, and I'm leaving that all on the ice as you're leaving the ice. What's going through Todd's head?
I think for me, what was going through my head at the time, and thanks for bringing that all back to me again, 8 years, 9 years later, didn't need that. But, I think as an athlete, when you go into an experience or go into a games knowing what the outcome will be, regardless of how you look at it. So it took me some time to be able to figure all of that out. And as a motivational speaker, I go through my life history of games. When I first started doing these talks, I could go in and do a talk in 10, 15 minutes and I'd be done. Now, because of my career and because of all the places I've been and all the things I've done, I have trouble getting it in within an hour because it's an amazing experience. And I've always taken something home from every single games. And for me, sitting up on the ice at the end, it was like, what the hell am I going to bring home from these games? Because in Vancouver in 2010, as you say, we weren't successful on the ice. But one of the things that I took home from those was, look at what this has done for the sport.
Yeah.
We've got a team or a nation that beat us in the semifinals, is now playing for gold. And it's taken the sport in their country, in their nation, from games that were going to be possibly shown 3-4 months down the road to this game was now going to be showed live all across Japan. And I think that's me.
Yeah.
In terms of who I am, in that I always try to look at the positive. I knew what the negative was. We as a team, we didn't win, and as a staff, we didn't play the systems that we put in place in order to win. Yeah. We basically went through the whole tournament successful because we played everybody and we rolled the lines and nobody could keep up to us. And that was very similar to what happened in 2018 this year, if you ask me.
Yeah.
Is we went through the round robin without any problems whatsoever. But as soon as it got to the game that meant something, unfortunately, things changed for whatever reason. Whether it's not having the confidence in your whole team, but again, that was just the hockey. But if I look back to these games in 2018 and seeing some of the athletes there and talking to some of them, knowing that this might be their last games and asking them to share some of their stories, I think one of the things that resonates with all of them is it's time. And time in terms of I've got nothing else that I need to prove either in the sport, or it's time to have a different quality of life. Training, competing, being an athlete is extremely hard on the body. And as our bodies tend to age, so does everything else. Our recovery time's not as fast. We come in to see you more often, which is great for you. But I think one of the big things that as athletes we need to understand, and as spectators of the people watching the athletes, is you have to understand that they're human too, and they need a break once in a while, and they need that social change and that social interaction in order to be able to either find another passion or create that synergy so that whatever it is that they are passionate about, they move on to that in the next chapter. You know, and for me, that next chapter is the Ability Center here in Ottawa.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that that will happen here in Ottawa to be able to give back.
And we're going to talk about that before we go, because I want to make sure that you get a voice in that, because I know that's a very, very big passion of yours. 2018, I don't think a lot of people know what a chef de mission does. We get told, this is the chef de mission, people, that's so nice, and then you sort of go, what is this person doing, right? Other than just getting a free pass to drink in the beer tent and go wherever you want. So, you know, I have my experiences with chef de mission being the games I've been at, but talk about what's the role of the chef de mission. What did you have to do before the games? What was your role during the games, and then sort of what's the role and your responsibilities after the games to summarize everything, and you know, who are you, you know. And I know there's, unlike a business per se, there's not necessarily financial shareholders, but for the sake of using a lack of a better term, but who's the shareholders that you have to respond to? Who are you responsible to, that people want to know what's your report on the games and how you evaluated what Canada did?
So for me, I think I'll start with that last question first. Who am I responsible to? Every single person that's there. Not only the Canadian athletes, but I'm there to represent all of the nation as a Canadian to all the international bodies that are there, both at the Olympic and Paralympic Games. Because for me, going into these ones, I was also on the coordination commission. So I've been going to South Korea every 6 months for the last 7 years, and racked up my air miles, obviously, to getting back and forth. But we helped with the planning and preparations for the games. Chef de mission, thank goodness for all of the athletes and all the people who were there, has nothing to do with cooking, because I am not a cook. As long as the athletes were willing to eat peanut butter and jam sandwiches the whole time, they would have been okay. But if it meant cooking, we would be in trouble. So the chef de mission, basically sort of what I've been told and the way it was sort of laid out to me was, Todd, you're the boss. So you're to look after all of the mission staff, all the coaches, all the athletes. You're to look after preparations, planning, and everything, and ensure that if there is any incidents or issues, you are the face of Team Canada. Yeah. So that's sort of what my mindset was. As you say, I've experienced many games and had the opportunity to see what it was like for other chef de missions. And I went into these games with that mindset. There was 5 games that I went to as an athlete, 3 chef de missions that I remember who they were: Patrick Jarvis, Ozzy, and Gaetan. And each one of them were very specific in how I remember them. So I went into these games with the mindset of, I want to ensure that when we finish these games in 2018, I would hope that the athletes, coaches, and staff, and mission staff, know and will remember who the chef de mission was for 2018. And hopefully it's for a positive experience, not a negative one. So I brought in things that hopefully would bring the teams together. And I think that was one of the biggest things going into these games in 2018. We had an experience in front of us that we have not experienced since 2008 and in Lillehammer.
Yeah.
Because in 1994 in Lillehammer, all the athletes were all in one village. Since that time, there's never been an athletes village all together. So as athletes, we had no choice. We were all together.
Yeah.
And as Canadians, we were all in one building, and there was one elevator in the building. So whether you liked it or not, you were spending a lot of time in elevators with people
or
with
a hallway.
no in elevators, because with mobility issues, everybody needed to get on the elevator.
True, but
So-
then for one elevator, you're waiting probably 20 minutes. For
Well,
the
if it
elevator.
was going up or down, you got on. If there was room, you got on. So you got to know all of the athletes, and and that was one of the things that I challenged all of the athletes and coaches and mission staff at the games was get to know the people that you're living with here for 3 weeks. I attended meetings weekly with the Canadian Paralympic Committee's executive committee. I sat in on all their executive meetings from a year and a half out to provide that knowledge and that experience, both from my side, because I've been going there, but also get an understanding from their side what they do, so that when and if I did have any issues, concerns, things I needed addressed, I knew who to go to, because by attending all those meetings, I had an understanding of who looked after what.
Yeah.
In the sporting world, and in a lot of worlds, each individual works in silos, and not much information gets shared amongst those silos. So as chef de mission, one of your jobs and one of your responsibilities is to know what happens in each one of those silos and connect them when they need to be connected. So it's a very busy job. Yes, it's free accreditation and free flight over there, and it's a volunteer position. But my days started at 5:30 in the morning, and they finished every morning at 2 a.m. So for me, what I ended up doing is the chef de mission meetings would start in the morning. So they usually were between 6 and 7 in the morning. So we would do a briefing before, find out if there was anything from the sports that we needed to bring forward. We would bring that up to the chef de mission meetings, and with that in mind, and then basically I would start going to sports. So I would be at the start line and the finish line of every major event that happened. I saw every medal that was being presented. They had a medals plaza, and I promised all of the athletes, and this was something that for me I promised every athlete, any day you won a medal, that I would put on a suit. So my suit, for those that haven't seen it, you can go online and pick it up, but I had one of the flashy suits that I had to wear every single day because Canada won a medal every day. And not only did we win a medal every day, but we went to the games hoping to improve on our performance from 2014, where we won 15 medals. Well, we came home with 28 medals from these games, the most medals we've ever won at a games. We came home with some amazing performances from our elite athletes, from some that have been around for a long time and some that this was their first games, but they've peaked at the right time.
Yeah.
We've brought in the right coaches and the right people in order to make them successful. Fast forward to where we are today. I've finished that role. I'm now moving on to the next chapter in my life, which is, as you said, something I wanted to do back in 2010, and that's be a dad. Spend some time at home, coach my son's sports. My daughter's into rock climbing. She loves arts. So being there for them to be passionate in whatever it is that they want to do. So again, leaving one chapter, but already knowing what my next chapter is. So I think for your listeners, one of the things they need to understand if they are considering retirement from one thing is make sure you've got something to fall back on, to keep yourself busy, to keep yourself active. You don't have to go train every day. You don't have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning like I was, but still find that passion in something and put that energy and drive that you had there into this.
So it's funny, that's a good segue, because where I was going next now is with your transition into this, quote unquote regular life of being a dad and being at home and doing dishes and taking out the garbage and shoveling and all that sort of stuff that the rest of us have to do while you're traveling the world on a plane. Now that you've taken these experiences from being a chef, being an ex-athlete, you coach sports, you're at the top pinnacle of your game, you've represented the country, you've won gold medals, you've won silvers, you've won bronzes. Now that your kids are in sports, and this is an interesting question I'd like to get from a parent's point of view and from your journey point of view, because I'm a hockey coach, I'm a high performance hockey coach. I've been intimately involved in youth sports for about, since 2003. I've got my own viewpoints of where sports is going from the youth level, but as a dad, as a guy who's represented country and nation at the international level. Where's youth sports now? What do you think is going on with, what do you see in your kids? What do you see in youth sport that they're getting from youth sport, or what is youth sport offering kids now? Like where's youth sport at right now, probably from your experience?
I think from my experience and just looking at my own kids, and Emily and I both being high performance athletes at one point, we want to ensure that our kids are kids and that they got the opportunity to be able to try multiple sports, multiple different activities, to have somebody on the ice 365 days a year is not going to help them. It's going to create more injuries. They need to experience being a kid. And that's one of the things that for my kids, we're not pushing them to do anything. Anything that they want to do is because it's something that they want. The ability to be able to try multiple sports. And if later on down in life you want to take a drive and go for something more competitive, then fine, we'll be there to support you. And I think that's one of the biggest things that, as a parent, that I haven't been able to do for the last 8 years in the ways that I wanted to, the way my parents supported me. But at the same time, I had friends and family that did do that for me.
Yeah.
So again, it's surrounding yourself with the right people. But you see the youth sports now where kids are specializing in sports at a very young age. And all their time and all their energy is put into one particular sport. And unfortunately, I think what's happening is they're going to get to a point where they might burn out and get to 18, 19 years old and start go to college, university and say, no, I did that for 6 days a week as a kid growing up. I don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah, I'm done.
And if you look at the numbers are amazing from Youth Olympic Games. If you look at the number of athletes that attend Youth Olympic Games, I want to say it's, and I don't quote me on the number because I'm not sure, but it's less than 10% of the people that compete in the Youth Olympic Games that you ever see in the Olympic Games. Because for them, they've devoted so much of their life, their youth, as a kid, by the time they get to the age of 16, 17, 18 years old, they go to Youth Olympic Games, and it's like, I've experienced the Olympics. If this is what the Olympics is, and so we've got to ensure, again, that fun aspect.
It's interesting you say that, because as a philosophy of mine, when I'm coaching hockey, when I'm being interviewed or when I'm talking to a board or things like that, I've repeatedly said over the last few years, and I'm picking on hockey, and I'm sure there's other sports involved in it, but hockey, in my opinion, having been played it and refereed it and coached it and been at the Olympics, is hockey, we're creating hockey players, we're not creating athletes. We're creating specialized little machines to play a game. And from my experience, I'm seeing some athletes, when they left the game at 16, 17, 18, or whatever they did, maybe they just weren't good enough to go on, whatever it may be, they can't play another sport. They can't do anything else. They don't know how to play ping pong. They don't know how to play rugby. They don't know how to be an athlete and run track. They're just a hockey guy that knows how to play hockey, but not coordinated enough to run like a runner, not coordinated enough to throw a baseball or a javelin and go on to some another passion. So I think it's important that as parents, you guys are instilling that experience have as much fun as you can. Be an athlete. If you're good at something, great, run with it, but make sure you're maintaining an athlete. And that athlete development, protocol that we see is you can impose that on every sport. Proper eating, proper stretching, proper nutrition, proper mental balance, mental psychology, whatever it is. That whole gamut that you can impose on every kid. But to your point, when you're specializing in one sport, it's being missed.
And I think you can probably be the most to talk about this. When you look at an individual who plays only one sport, and you're working those muscles for that sport, unfortunately, you don't work any of the other muscles. So that was one of the reasons why, for me, I've done so many sports internationally, because I always considered them a cross trainer.
Yep.
In hockey, I'm always pulling and pushing. For me, I use my arms for everything. So I needed to find sports that allowed me to use other parts that I'm not using in hockey. So I had less injuries.
Yep.
Like for me, shoulder injuries and that sort of stuff, I didn't have many of those because I did multiple sports. Now that I've slowed down and I'm older, I have lots of shoulder injuries. Yep. But I think it gets, if we attribute a lot of the injuries and stuff, if you've got somebody who's done multiple sports, I would think their recovery time is a lot faster, because if you're a hockey player or a soccer player, whatever it is, and you get injured, unfortunately, you can't think, or you don't think of other ways to be able to train because you only know one thing. Where if you have done multiple sports, okay, well, if I've got this leg injured, I can use the other leg and still train the rest of my body and still do cardio and still do this if I do this sport or swimming, or, there's ways to get around and still be able to train.
Well, and life will bring us, right? Nobody plays a sport from 3 to 98.
Yeah.
Different stages of life, things have to change, and if you're only a specialized sport person, when it comes time to changing, your body doesn't give you what you want. You see people, you just fade off. They can't do anything else. Right. Before we go, we're not going to run off too much longer. I know this has been a bit of a longer podcast, but I think having Todd Nicholson here has been worth our time and our energy to put into a bit of a longer chat. And again, we're talking to Todd Nicholson, for anybody who's just kind of kicking in here. A glorified athlete, coach, representation of Canada, who's done more for this country than most people will do in their lifetime. So one thing I know that's happened in the last couple of years for you, Todd, and your wife Emily, that has become a very big passion of your guys, is this Ability Center. So for those who don't know, Todd and his wife Emily are looking at bringing an Ability Center to Ottawa. And in the past 4 or 5 years, Todd and I have talked, on multiple occasions about, what it's going to take and what he's doing and what their dream is. But just from your guys' end, where did it start? And sort of where's that process at now? And maybe what's the vision and the passion behind it? And where are we at in that process? And maybe some expectations for the future, the next 4, 5, 6 years, where's it at? And then we'll just educate the listeners on that.
So I think stepping back, probably, my wife's a recreational therapist, and she treats kids with disabilities from ages 5 right up to 19. And for her, passion has been recreation and therapy. So it's getting people active and teaching them all the fundamental skills of movement and that sort of stuff. And she went to Variety Village, which is a rehab center or a community center just outside of Toronto, Mississauga. And that center had equipment all along the sides that was accessible to anybody and everybody to use, so fully inclusive. And she went and seen that place about 15, 18 years ago and said, we need one of these here in Ottawa. And that dream has never stopped. That passion has never stopped. So when I retired from sports, we thought about giving a scholarship fund to somebody here in Ottawa, to different schools to help athletes pursue. And it grew from that to, we're now looking at building a $52 million, 125,000 square foot community center that is fully inclusive and has 4 main streams of service. And we're sort of going to try and replicate what they've created in Whitby. There's the Ability Center in Whitby, which was a vision of Jim Flaherty, the late Jim Flaherty, and his wife Christine Elliott. And that vision was to have a community center that was inclusive and accepting of all. As much as it has accessibility features within it, one of the main features is it's a place where everybody can go as a family, whether you're young, whether you're old, whether you're elite, whether you're grassroots. There's 4 main streams of service within the Ability Center. And when they cut the ribbon on the first one in 2012, their vision was to have one in every major city across the country. So Emily and I are spearheading a group here in Ottawa to be the second one. There's 4 main streams of service. The first one is sport, and it's everything from grassroots right through to elite. To give you a picture of sort of what the Ability Center looks like, close your eyes, and about 5:30 in the morning, every morning, there's over 600 seniors that go to the Ability Center and walk around a 200-meter track inside, and it's a social gathering and creates that awareness for them. So again, we're living in a nation and a country where our population is aging, and we need to create safe environments for them to be able to still continue on doing what it is they love to do. So that's one stream. The second one is arts, music, drama, culture, and ensuring that, again, if you're not passionate about sports, that there's an avenue for you to be able to do that. The third one is life skills. So for an individual like myself who was injured at the age of 18, if you've had a heart attack, a stroke, you're leaving the rehab center and you need to continue on with your physical education or physical, not education, but you're like to stay active and so on and so forth. It sometimes can be difficult to get into gyms and that sort of stuff because you can be a liability, and unfortunately frown upon that. And not only that, but for some, they still need that place where they can go to experience and get the knowledge and training that they need to in order to continue on. And then the fourth one, and probably one of the most important one, is research and innovation. So we're working with the colleges and universities here in Ottawa and surrounding area to create a real live lab and a research hub for all of those young, smart minds that are coming up in order to be able to create an atmosphere for them to be able to work together in all the different avenues to create and build awareness for everybody, and creating material and creating information, tools. And it's just the vision behind the Ability Center. Where we are today is we are about 5 to 6 years into it now, maybe 7. It's taken us a little bit longer because we are building a template for replication. We are part of the Rendezvous Le Breton group, which is a group right now that is in negotiations.
Giggle, but
yeah, it's a group that right now are in negotiations with the National Capital Commission to be in Le Breton Flats, to redevelop Le Breton Flats. And ideally, that's where the Ability Center needs to be, because we want this center to be accessible to the whole city and to be a hub for all of those things. That, again, it's not just sport. So we've been able to and secure some great partners and to ensure that that this will happen. And where are we today? We're still waiting for, we are waiting for a decision from the NCC and the Rendezvous Le Breton group to move forward. And our hope is, and we continue to hope, that that's where we will end up being, with the mindset of hopefully shovels in the ground by 2019. And we are part of phase 1 of the Rendezvous Le Breton redevelopment. And if it ends up going forward, hopefully doors open by 2021, 2022.
So I know we're going to wrap things up here soon. And one of the things that me and Todd talked before the show, we talked about a few ideas we wanted to talk about. So he was somewhat prepared to talk about some items, and we've gotten through that. And but what I didn't tell him is that we're going to wrap the show up with a little, just a little segment that I'll try and do with some of the guests, and we're going to try and ransack them with a couple of questions and see what comes out of their mouth real quick. So we're going to call this section, I'm going to bench you. Right, and I think you've been benched before in your life, but probably
Vancouver 2010 comes to mind again.
You've been probably benched different ways, but to me, I'm going to bench you right now. We're going to ask you a few questions. So there's no Todd Nicholson rambling. I just want a couple of good words, and we'll see what comes out of your mouth here, and we'll see what kind of fun we can have. So first question: you played with a lot of athletes, a lot of different sports, but obviously spent most of your time in sledge hockey. Who's your favorite teammate?
Harvey Lord.
Why?
Just his passion. So Harvey Lord, Jean Labonte are two people that come to mind for me. They both are very passionate about what they do. They always thought about the player first and considered all of the things that a player needed. Harvey was a little rough around the edges, but I think he's one of the main reasons why I got involved in sports and stayed in sports for as long as I did.
If there was somebody that fit the definition in the dictionary of word character, it was probably him. I love the guy to death, and there probably wasn't a more passionate guy about building the sport, helping out the youth, but character to the nines, this guy. Second question, your favorite sledge hockey moment?
It's something that when I drive into my garage every day, I see a picture of it on my wall. And it was Rolf Einar Pedersen from Norway. He was probably one of the most, I wouldn't say hated players in the game, but he was
strongly disliked.
Strongly disliked, but it's because he was so good.
He was,
he was an amazing player, and he left it all on the field of play. And I remember one game that we played. It was in PEI, and he hit Danny Werner, who is this guy who weighs maybe 110 pounds soaking wet in the corner, and Danny didn't come out. And I went in to defend Danny, and as I'm going in, I'm thinking, I'm going to get creamed here. Because, and as I was skating in to hit him back, he brought his elbow up and got me under the chin.
I remember that.
And I remember seeing stars for a bit. But honestly, somebody got a picture of that elbow in my head.
But perfect timing. I've seen that.
Yeah. And I see that picture every day when I drive into my garage, and it reminds me every day of, as much as it was about teams and as much as it was about a whole bunch of different things, I respect the guy totally.
Yep.
And seen him this year competing again in 2018, and
He's
hats
done
off to
amazing
him.
things for that country.
He has, and I think, we've got players here in Canada that have the same reputation.
Yep.
Amazing players, but on the ice,
It's go
hate
time.
them.
It's go time.
Hate them.
Yep.
And I think that's one of the things that, again, we look at. I've got some amazing friends. I can travel all over the world and not have to pay for accommodations because of the friends I've met.
Who's your, whether it's sledge hockey, doesn't have to be a sport, could be just your regular life, anything you want, but who's been your biggest inspiration?
I can't limit that to one.
Give me your top two or top three.
I think for me, my wife definitely, for putting up with my shit. She's definitely been my number one supporter in everything that I've done and everything I continue to do. And my family, I look back and think back to when I got hurt.
Yeah.
And what they had to sacrifice
Yeah.
for me to continue on and be successful and stuff. And, aside from family, I think probably the biggest people that have been instrumental in a lot of the things that we've been doing have been the volunteers. The Paralympic movement started off with as a group of volunteers. Now it needs to get professional. And the people that are doing the jobs need to get paid, compensated for the work that they're doing, because we are well beyond an organization of volunteers. So I think hats off to the volunteers as well, who have made these games and our experience is an amazing experience.
Who's been what, and this is more geared to you now. What's been your biggest on-ice, in-game moment for you personally? I know you weren't a big goal scorer, but you had a few goals in your time, and you were a guy that liked to run up in the corners, but what's one moment that you sort of, other than taking an elbow to the head, that you seemingly volunteered for, but in-game moment that you really...
I think for me, and I don't know whether you include it or not, but it was the games in Vancouver. Damn, you're getting me emotional today. But anyways.
I was just hoping you'd say a goal.
Yeah, exactly. No, for me, it wasn't a goal. It was a handshake. It was in the final game in Japan, or it was the final game in Vancouver for us when we were playing the semifinals against Japan. And Mitz, who was the goalie for the Japan team, who beat us in the semifinal game to make it for them to go to the gold medal game. Yeah. And I remember giving him a big hug and saying,
go do it.
Take this to the next level.
Yeah. One last question, then we're going to wrap this thing up, and this is only a one-word answer. Who's more competitive, you or Emily?
Emily.
She'll love that answer. So we'll wrap this up right now, and again, just wanted to thank, again, if you haven't heard of Todd Nicholson, you've been living under a rock. I encourage you to do some YouTubing, see some videos on what he's done for this country and within sport. As far as just as close as 2018, he represented Canada as a chef de mission, so he led our nation, and to my recollection, it was one of the best Paralympic games that we've done. I think we finished top 2, top 3, top 4 in medals. Todd Nicholson, since the age of 20, 21, 22, has been an inspiration to this nation and has helped this country grow in the Paralympic world, and has done, I think, a lot of things for a lot of athletes who probably have no clue what he's done. And so we should all take the time, reach out to him through the Ability Center. Check out, again, abilitycenterottawa.org. That's abilitycenter.ottawa.org. Check them out, because I think in the next 4 or 5 years, we're going to see some great things coming up. Just to wrap things up, thanks for listening today. The new website, the podcast will be on there as usual, TonyCarbonetti.com. Again, that's TonyCarbonetti, my full name.com. Thanks for listening today. I hope you took 2 cents out of this, and we'll talk to you guys real soon. Bye for now.